My name is Graham Porter. I am the head of the BPX organization here in Asia Pacific. And what we're here to talk about today is revenue attribution. At the time of registering, if you did get the white paper, you may have got a document that describes our five-step process for five-step model for revenue attribution success. And I know Veronica will talk about that a little bit further down the track. A quick 30 seconds on us. We are a worldwide organization that specializes in MarTech, sales tech, and all the surrounding other technologies, but also change management, data, people, process, etc. All of the things that face organizations of all sort of sizes when they're trying to automate, especially marketing functions. So what led us to have a conversation about revenue attribution? Because it's not new, it's not sexy, because it's about data, right? And data typically isn't, but it is vital. It is vital, and we asked a bunch of questions before this event, so thank you for participating in that three-question survey. Now, I'm only going to talk about one of them, and what we've noticed is the responses that have come on. There isn't one person who is attending this webinar who doesn't think that it's a relevant topic. So on to the meat of the session, and I'll be quiet in a second, but I'm going to introduce the three people who are on the screen at the moment. So leading the conversation here is Veronica Holmes, and V and I have known each other for 10 years, if not a little bit longer. And I've not seen a more experienced consultant covering both business and marketing technology. And V will introduce the two panelists here today to discuss revenue attribution in more depth. Connor is the Senior Manager of Strategy for Customer Strategy at Uber Eats, which is the restaurant side of the Uber business. And joining Connor is Chris, whose experience in technology and its application to business outcomes certainly rivals that of Veronica. He's also, I found out this morning, just a newly minted MBA. So congratulations to that. So with that in mind, that quick introduction, I'll ask Veronica to take over the microphone. V.
Morning. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to get Connor and Chris to give us sort of a quick breakdown of yourselves and sort of a basic overview of what your role entails and the 20-second elevator pitch on your organization. So we'll start with Connor.
Hey everyone, I'm Connor. I work for a little company called Uber Eats. I've been working at Uber for 2.5 years now, and I am effectively a marketing specialist working inside of the sales organization. So Uber Eats is Uber is a traditionally like B2C company, but when Uber Eats launched, we have a newly minted B2B function, which I operate in. So my role is strategy, particularly around customer engagement and empowering the rest of our sales sort of organization through marketing specialized skills.
Awesome. Throw it over to Chris.
Yeah, thanks. And I hope you can hear me. My computer died just before the webinar started, so I'm on my phone. Yeah, my name's Chris. I head up the operations team at Secure Code Warrior, and we look after the tools, processes, data, reporting, and enablement that supports the business. Who are Secure Code Warrior? So we're a global security company that makes software development better and more secure. And our vision is to empower developers to be the first line of defense within their organizations by making security awareness high and providing them with the skills and tools that they can code securely from the very beginning of the software development lifecycle.
Awesome. So we're going to jump straight into this. We've got half an hour to kind of cover something that's, quite frankly, that's massive. And I have to agree with something that Graham said, which is that a lot of what revenue attribution is about data, and data tends to be a very unsexy topic. But there are a lot of people today, and we did send out a bit of a survey before this occurred, and we wanted to get a bit of a feel for how people view revenue attribution and what they want it for. And it turns out that that a lot of people want it for kind of the same things, but everybody who responded to the survey said that they wanted to do revenue attribution to understand marketing's contribution to pipeline and to make better budget decisions, which I think probably resonates a little bit with both of you in terms of the types of goals that you have around revenue attribution. Jump to the next slide, Graham. And we're going to talk a little bit here about the biggest roadblocks. So why are you not doing revenue attribution today? And interestingly enough, lots of spread across the different options that we offered. But unreliable data and a lack of strategic direction were the two sort of most popular choices there in terms of why revenue attribution is not happening today. So I'm actually really happy to see that lack of technology is not top of the pops there, because one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how it's really about the people and the strategy and aligning those more than it is about starting with a technology platform. But I'm going to throw something over to Connor very quickly. You guys are, I think one of the reasons why I'm really excited to talk to the two of you is because you have very different models in terms of marketing and sales and very different kind of organizational structures. But within Uber Eats, we've been talking about how you don't really have kind of separated marketing and sales organizations. You all sort of work together on specific campaign goals and directives. Can you talk a little bit more about that structure?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like a little bit of the history is like Uber is a business that is built very much in flight, and we've seen a lot of change. So in the time that I've been here, we saw the centralization of our sales function, moving from both like a city-based structure to a centralized function over Australia and New Zealand. And through that, there's sort of like a development, and we didn't necessarily get the support we wanted from like our global marketing teams. And so the push regionally was to structure someone like myself with a marketing background and expertise within the sales organization, which allows us to sort of be a bit more nimble and on the front foot and a bit more, I guess, in the weeds of what we're trying to achieve than trying to necessarily, I guess, like validate marketing as a function, but instead using marketing type skills to empower like our sales teams, our account managers, and everything like that.
Can you talk about the goals or the metrics that you, as a sales and marketing group, measure yourselves against? And yeah. What was the process like of arriving at those agreed upon goals and metrics?
Yeah, I think it's something that's like evolved very much over time. For us, the key things that we sort of look at is looking at gross bookings is really important to us, like managing the amount of trips that are happening for our clients. Churn is incredibly important for us as a very B2B function. We are a marketplace, so it's really important to know not just how many people we're getting in that are new, but also who's not enjoying the experience or who's not getting enough out of the platform. While of course, active storefronts is really important for us, and more recently for us, like looking at the profitability of our customers that we have on the platform. But that has been very much something that's negotiated over time. Like I think we did have very much a structure that was so focused on acquisition, but as the Australian market in particular has matured, it's really been important for us as a sales organization and as a marketing organization to look at retention and that becoming one of our major metrics that we look at.
So those sorts of engagement metrics that you can get are really important for how you measure your performance today at a campaign level.
Absolutely, because it's not just about end monetary goals. Obviously, that is like the largest goal, but really it's about if we have people who are maintaining themselves on the platform, how do we make sure that we are like constantly engaging them, both in terms of opportunities for them to diversify the way that they're either using the platform, and that might be through things like virtual storefronts that are like utilizing the spaces that they already have through Uber Eats, or other opportunities to do in-app marketing and stuff like that. really that doesn't necessarily happen as a hard sell, but it's about engagement, and really what we start to rely on is education, is really what like helps drive more opportunity for our customers.
And you mentioned that because of that sales and marketing being sort of part of the same team, you've never really had those alignment problems in terms of marketing and sales being on the same page and moving towards those same goals together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I guess take for granted, and us having these conversations like definitely brought that to mind as something I hadn't really thought too much about in a long time. But really, we don't have to have the conversations necessarily in terms of the value, in terms of having a marketing division and what are they doing for the business, because what we are sort of allowed for in this sort of embedded model, at least locally, is sort of more ownership from the sales teams, whether that's at a campaign level through marketing being their tools as opposed to marketing purely servicing them. I think what like that really allows is more engagement in terms of the campaign rather than the function of marketing itself.
So I'm really intrigued by this model because it plays so much into what thought leadership that's going on in the industry right now around building revenue operations teams, as opposed to building sort of marketing operations and sales operations and different and kind of separated divisions and passing leads over the fence and all that. So, and we'll talk to Chris a little bit in a second, who has probably more of a classic kind of model where that's concerned. But this whole revenue operations approach is really helping you to become a little bit more account focused in your day-to-day. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It helps us focus a little bit less on like the internal politics of teams and more on like the outcomes that we're still trying to drive together, which I think ultimately allows us to be more focused. And it's I guess it removes for us a layer of metrics that we might have to be constantly proving or circling back on, and instead it allows us to see what didn't work and where to iterate and where there are more opportunities, I guess, for more account level focused campaigns.
And rubber hits the road here. Do you make decisions on what campaigns you run, what investments you make with your scarce marketing dollars, because nobody has an unlimited budget, even at Uber? Do you make those decisions based on those metrics and those numbers and those campaign specific goals that you've all agreed on?
I think we do. I think one of the things that's unique about our scenario is that like we really, instead of we have like an always on net new customer operation, but really where we've decided to focus more is on the customers that we do have, which like part of that is understanding that is really about owning the channels we already have. So it is truly about the effectiveness of, say, our CRM and of our email campaigns and how we engage the customers. So it's less about like social media leads and that sort of stuff. I think it does happen, but you know, we're really penetrated in the Australian and New Zealand market. So really it's about like, we've got them here, now what? How do we stack value? How do we encourage that kind of growth? And so it's really more, I guess, like lucky in that sense of it's not about the dollar value of the marketing campaigns, but more about the engagement for us, because we really do lean a bit heavier on like our own channels.
And you guys really have blazed a trail here in ANZ in terms of your model. It's quite different from your corporate model. And can you talk to sort of the challenges you've had as a regional team, really kind of dealing with trying to blaze your own trail within a larger organization, but sort of being beholden to the systems and processes that the org gives you?
Absolutely. So I mean, like having said all that, like acquisition for net new customers is absolutely the primary goal for, I think, the rest of the business outside of Australia and New Zealand. There still obviously is a goal for us, but you know, if we look at the US and Canada teams, who are like much more close to our sort of central global teams, like they still have a lot more to go, as opposed to like, I guess where Australia sits is like a unique market of there not being that many of us and it being like quite hub oriented. It's a little less, like it's a little bit easier for that penetration to happen. So I guess like when that happens, we are sort of beholden to what the priorities of the global team are. And when they're still looking at like global average, it is still like way more weighted to that. So it has really been about being more creative with what we have at our disposal, and that is certainly tied to like the data that we have and the data that we want necessarily in ANZ when we look at more retention-based campaigns and more value stacking hasn't always been there. So it's been about really being creative where we get data, how do we integrate that into the marketing operations that we have, like when is that setting up the right automations and like creating the right leads, I think is certainly been a challenge. But it is an exciting one because I think what it's allowed us to do is like, like trailblaze and like take our learnings that are definitely being adopted by the global team. It's really exciting.
So I wanted to chat with Chris now for a second, because we sort of heard of a more of an account-based revenue ops sort of global to regional model that is at Uber Eats. But Secure Code Warrior, you're a smaller tech organization, a startup in high growth mode, and very much sort of a more classical B2B model than the Uber Eats model. Can you talk a little bit about that model that you work within?
Yeah, so I guess from a B2B model, quite traditional. I guess the only difference is with the ops team, the operations managers are all in one team. So that helps us align in terms of our tools and processes and making sure that we've got a bit of a seamless handover. For example, when leads go from marketing to inside sales to customer success. And we've developed a model where we've mapped out our customer life cycle, because I think one of the stats that you showed from the survey was really around strategic alignment. So we built the Bowtie, which is our customer life cycle, and really that's to help all the functions align with what the business is trying to do. And that's really helped us sort of map out, well, what are we trying to measure at each stage of the customer journey, and also in terms of content, which content are we going to share at which points in time, what's going to be relevant for the lead at that point.
Awesome. So Graham's brought up your bow tie, which you've been very generous in sharing with us for this webinar. So explain how important it is to align everybody from the absolute beginning to the absolute end in terms of building out that pipeline attribution model at Secure Code Warrior.
Well, I think from the customer's perspective, they don't really care which function they're engaging with, right? So, but from internally, from a business, we don't want to lose the customer at any point. And we want to start measuring how we're engaging with the customer. So really the bow tie is about taking the anonymous through to the advocate. And traditionally, the marketing funnel is the left-hand side of the bow tie. So that's really how are we acquiring leads and putting them into the top of funnel, nurturing them so we get to the point where they're ready to have a call with inside sales. The mid part is our sales cycle, and being a B2B business, it's quite a long sales cycle. So, looking at the interactions there with prospects, how can we speed that up? What educational assets can we seed to them to give them the information they need to improve that velocity? And then on the right-hand side, that's really once you become a customer, you've been handed to customer success. What's that onboarding journey like? How are you utilizing the product? How to expand the footprint within that customer? And then obviously we want to renew. We're a subscription-based business. We want to make sure we get that renewal at the end of the term and keep those customers and reduce churn.
So let's talk about models. So we've talked previously about how you started with kind of a first touch attribution model because that was quite frankly it's the easiest one to get. But can you sort of talk through your journey a little bit towards more of a multi-touch model approach and how you've been going about that and any challenges you've hit under that in that process?
Yeah, so I'd probably break it down into 3 stages. So the first stage is really looking at top of the funnel, but just from lead source. So is it from the website? Is it from an event? Which is lead source is helpful, but it can be quite general in terms of how do I measure which marketing activities are actually driving the results. So that's sort of where we started. The second stage was more getting into what's the acquisition program. So yes, it was the website, but which piece of content was it? Yes, it was an event, but which trade show? And now we're sort of getting more into multi-touch, where we're interested in acquisition because that drives volume, but we are also interested in quality and velocity. So what activities are helping move the person or the prospect faster through this Bowtie framework? And that's really what we're trying to do. So just an example, we know like we get a lot of leads from events or through the website, but one thing we're starting to see by looking at the multi-touch data is that our email nurture programs are having a positive effect on moving people through faster, and also our website trials. So if you go onto our website, you can actually, as a developer, trial our product online. And what we see is a lot of deals where, you know, a month before that deal closes, there's a lot of activity within that account on that particular asset, the website trial, and that's helping them make a decision. So that sort of information is really valuable in terms of, you know, what do we do? But I guess you need to have the right data. And then I guess one roadblock that sort of I've learned over my career, because coming from a technical background, I can be very much focused on the technology, the workflow and the process. But really what's important for the other point that was mentioned around data is the people side of it, the enablement, because you can have the best system and everything set up right. But the thing is, you're always going to have new people coming into different roles, whether that's a marketing manager, that's an inside sales rep, an AE. If they don't understand what they need to do, how to change the lead status or the opportunity status, how to set up their programs in Marketo with the right success, that's going to impact your data. So the big call out I'd say is just around the enablement and the documentation and that sort of thing.
So that's really useful advice, because I've worked with a lot of organizations around this process, and I tend to have rooms, workshops of rooms full of people who are talking about data, they're talking about process, they're talking about operational life cycle, stuff like that. Let's just get it into the system, and then you launch it, and then it all falls apart. Connor, I'm interested in with your sales teams and the people that you work with. Is there a big focus on sort of swimming together as people and that process, rather than sort of focusing on what the technology is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was totally our approach in terms of the way that we chose to set things up. So definitely for us, it was about the campaign approach, which tied really closely with the CRM and empowering both account management teams who knew their books and knew their customers to know when to like drop them into, say, a nurture campaign for an upsell or for an education campaign. So really, I think it was super beneficial for us to make it feel like it wasn't something that was happening to their book that they then had to manage, but something that they were a part of the process with. So whether that was them actively putting it into a campaign themselves that would trigger some of the automations that we had set up, I think that really helped them feel more engaged with that customer and give us that like sort of human touch to follow up kind of automations, because they were so much more aware of it.
I think it's really important. Chris, when you were setting up your flow through and everything that was going on, how much work and effort went into putting that training and that discipline on top of the model to make sure that the people were entering data in the right way and knew what types of data to enter and when, and the definition of when a lead was converted, and all those kinds of icky conversations we know actually have to happen?
Yeah, I would say it's a journey, not a destination. So even today, we're still reconfiguring documentation, enablement programs, and training, because if there's any misinterpretation of that process, that's going to reflect in the data. So I think it's just having empathy for those roles and just understanding, consulting with them and understanding what their challenges are, and just asking, do you understand why this needs to change, this status needs to change here? Because, you know, if they don't understand that, then your reporting isn't going to be accurate.
So I think that's an interesting thing, because, you know, you can have the most disciplined kind of process in the world, but if there's one spot, it's kind of in that bow tie, if you had one of those blocks falling out the bottom, that'd be it. Like your end-to-end kind of reporting on that would be compromised. Have you run into those kinds of problems, and how do you address those gaps when you find them?
We have, and I think, so one example is just our inside sales team, where we had a different interpretation of what a sales qualified lead was. So that's something that we're working on in terms of making sure we've got the right documentation and the training. So I think it's just checking in regularly with the different teams, doing a bit of a pulse check and making sure there's a clear understanding of what that means. You know, prompting people with questions, not just doing a one way, here's the training, here's the documentation, go take it and make the assumption that they understand it. It's really got to be a collaboration with those teams.
So as we start to wrap this up, I would like one piece of advice from each of you, from someone who's at the starting gate. So they're at the start of this process. They're looking out over this journey that you're talking about, Chris. What's your piece of advice, Connor, to the person staring down that barrel?
I think it's know the metrics that you're really trying to understand through the teams, and help to empower them, and know what people want to hear. I think for us, and this is definitely something we didn't get to start from scratch. Like, this was sort of inheriting a lot of things that we went for. So it was a lot of, I would say, like, no.
I think people rarely ever get to start from scratch in brand new shiny systems. I think that's something that I think Chris kind of had going for him. But sorry, go on.
No, absolutely. And I think for me, it is really about putting in that legwork with the teams and talking. And I think for us, like, it's quite a large stakeholder piece, which is really been crucial. And I think that taking people on the journey makes those metrics a bit cleaner at the end, and lets us know how to prioritize what we're reporting back.
Brilliant. Chris, what's your voice of reason from the other side?
And I think, yeah, to your point, I was quite lucky. The company, there was only around 40 people 2 years ago when I started, and we've quadrupled the number of staff and tripled the number of customers in the last 2 years. But I think if you're just starting to think about this, whatever size the organization is, I would, before you even start configuring anything from a technology standpoint, is just get the main functional stakeholders in a room and map out, you know, whether it's on a whiteboard or on a Zoom meeting, map out your customer life cycle. And you really need to start there and get alignment on what those different stages are and the different gates, what needs to happen before a customer moves. Because once you've got that alignment, then you can go away and really work out, well, these are our key stages. This is where the customer flows through. This is what we're going to start measuring over the top.
I think just as sort of a last sort of note from me, I find that sometimes when people sit in a room like that, it's the first indication of where disagreements or gaps are likely to be, but it's also the first chance everyone has to understand each other's point of view of where those gaps are, where those challenges are likely to be. It might be the first time marketing have heard from the data team that we just can't get that data to you. We don't have that infrastructure. So it's really kind of important to map that out, as you say. That's fantastic insight from our panelists. I'm going to wrap it up a little bit now. Graham, if you can just bring up sort of that last slide, that would be amazing. But so I think that this very much aligns with what our panelists have been saying. And I've been working on this model kind of for the last 10, 15 years of my career, and really started to sort of bring it together now. But what Chris was saying there very much sort of aligns with what I like to do, which is to build that metrics and model alignment and bring those business stakeholders together from day one to kind of build that first stage of your revenue attribution. Then we start to look at, you know, what's your marketing automation and CRM best practices, and how do we build out the operational models around that? make sure that our demand generation strategies are all aligned and that we know and understand all of our inbound data sources, understanding the whole life cycle and the lead management. Where are the touch points? Where are the handover points? And then you can start to build the systems that to support that. Once you understand all of these different ideas and start to build and train staff on adoption, and then we start with the visualization. What are the dashboards and what are the learnings and the processes we put in place to actually action the kind of information that we're getting from this process? So I want to wrap this up. Did we get any, I don't think we got any sort of last minute questions from the audience, but I want to really thank our panelists, Chris and Connor, for bringing their insights to this particular subject today. And if you've got any questions after the fact, please feel free to kind of send them through to BPX, and we can get your questions answered. Do you have any last sort of wrap up thoughts, Graham?
Other than to say thank you to all three of you, actually. But Chris, Connor in particular, thank you. And V, great job.
Thank you, everybody. And we will hopefully see you out there in the community.